Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Carter, and I'm FCNL's Quaker Engagement Program Assistant. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'll be running technology for this event, so here are a few tech considerations as we are gathering. Please share your name and meeting or church in the chat, and if you have a particular challenge or question you are bringing about organizing your community's discernment on reproductive health, you can share that in the chat as well. As you can see, we are recording this event, but the audience will not be included in the recording for privacy reasons, just the speakers. Even so, feel free to turn off your video if you are uncomfortable keeping it on. Captioning is available automatically. If you do not want to see the captions, you can click on the live transcript option on your Zoom toolbar and click Hide Subtitles. We'll have some time for questions towards the end of the event. Please share your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many as we have time for. Please focus your questions on how we can support you in holding or participating in discernment in your Quaker community. Please do not use the chat to broadcast your own views on abortion or to try and persuade others of a particular view. If you're calling in on the phone and you have a question you want to direct to the panelists, please email me at ccarter@fcnl.org. You can also email me if you are in need of Zoom tech support, or you can private chat me from Zoom's chat bar. Again, my email is ccarter@fcnl.org, and I will be putting that in the chat shortly. That's it for the tech cues. I will now pass it to Alicia McBride, FCNL Senior Director for Quaker Leadership, who will frame this event and introduce our moderator.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you everyone for being here. It's great to be here with so many of you for this conversation. I want to just start by stating the obvious, which is that talking about these issues, reproductive health and abortion, is a really polarizing topic. And a lot of people's perspectives on these issues is very complex and nuanced. And it's hard to talk about these issues with compassion and empathy and understanding, which is why we're here to figure out how to do that in our own communities. Tonight, we're gathered in an online space, and everyone's a little box on a screen. And you may know some of the people who are here, and you may not know everyone. So we're not in a format where we can have a complex, nuanced conversation with each other, but we are in a format where people can feel hurt or marginalized by what happens. So to repeat what Claire said earlier, this is really not a listening session on the topic of abortion and reproductive health and what FCNL should or shouldn't do or say. This is about how do we help you have the resources and the support to have those conversations in your community that you can share with FCNL and the policy committee. We're not asking you to put your emotions aside. These are very emotional issues, but we are asking you to focus your comments and questions in the chat on how you are working to organize this discernment, not on your perspective or experience. And from the questions many of you have already sent in, we know you're thinking deeply about these issues and how to raise them. So I'm not worried. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And to say that we do have the chat set so that everyone can see the questions and who is here. There's a lot of collective wisdom in this group, and I think it's helpful to feel like we're in community together doing this. If at any point the open chat becomes a barrier to creating a positive space and supporting each other, we can change the settings so that only the hosts can see it. But just wanted to let you know that's a possibility. But for now, we encourage you to share your questions and take care of each other as we support this listening among friends. And with that intention, I invite us to settle into some grounding silence as we open for a few minutes, and then I will turn things over to Ebby Luvaga, who's the clerk of our policy committee and a member of Ames Friends Meeting in Ames, Iowa. So let's settle for a few minutes together. Thank you, friends. I will turn things over to Abby to introduce our speakers.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this event. I really appreciate seeing a lot of people joining us this evening for this discernment on reproductive health. Like Alicia said, this is a very emotional and discussion, but we also would like to ensure that we are respecting each other and also just taking care of one another while we're going through this process. And I would also like to thank the other two members who are joining me in this conversation this evening. The first one is Jeannie Stower, who is a member of the policy committee and also a member of the Berkeley Friends meeting in Berkeley, California. And the other person is Lauren Brownlee, who is a member of the Bethesda Friends meeting. And Lauren is actually also worked for FCNL as the Associate General Secretary for the committee and culture. Now, before I invite my two colleagues and friends to join us in this conversation this evening, I would first like to give some background on the process and how we got to where we are right now. I know some of you are probably asking, why now? Why have we chosen to discuss this topic? But soon following the Supreme Court Justice decision on Roe v. Wade, the policy committee started receiving a lot of communication and responses from friends all over the country asking us to do something. Some of the requests were, we need to move forward. FCNL needs to come up with a statement of some sort. And it has been a long time since the policy committee or FCNL had actually taken a position on this issue. So friends were asking for this discernment, and the policy committee made a decision to go ahead and get started during annual meeting for those who were there. And this is, yes, again, a very, very challenging and emotional communication to have. And like Alicia said earlier this evening, we are here to not necessarily listen, but we are here to help meetings and friends be able to discern, to help in the discernment process and hopefully answer some of the questions that you'll be hearing from the two panelists as well. So what has happened so far is we hope that you'll go ahead and listen to us and then take over from here and get back to your meetings and come up with some conversations so that you'll share with us as the policy committee, and then we'll be able to take it from there. While there's probably never a good time to be able to do any of this, we believe that it's very important for the policy committee to listen to friends, as we've always done when there is a need. And we haven't really had a time to focus on this issue, but this is probably the time to do that. So many of you have sent in some questions in advance, and we've had a chance to look at those questions. And those have actually raised some important, there's some important issues raised. One of the questions that came up, or one thing that Quakers are asking, or friends are asking, is the question of, is reproductive health a euphemism for abortion, or is it more inclusive than that? So one of the things we are looking at as a policy committee, we have looked at this from the context of the health, and that is why we are referring to that more as healthcare, as opposed to just looking at it as an abortion issue. Another thing is, when it comes to unity, are we looking for unity just on reproductive health or reproductive justice? And this is another area where we hope that as friends, you're going to inform us, and as policy committee, we'll read and listen and pay attention and discern everything that you're going to send to us and hear what friends are telling us. And then the other question is, how do we understand what unity among friends means? And that is what we are seeking to also look at. So what we are going to do for the next few minutes, I'm going to invite my two friends, Ginny and Lauren, and I have some questions that I would like for you to address, because I know your meetings are already either planning or they've already started these conversations. So if you can just share with us briefly what you're doing. So the first question I would like us to focus on is, I know that both of your monthly meetings have been or are actually looking at this process. So can you describe to us briefly what your committee is doing and how you're organizing around your discernment around this topic specifically? So Jeannie, if you can go ahead and get us started on that, we'd really appreciate that.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you to everyone who is attending today to help us assure that we get the broadest kind of input and feedback, and as a result of your discernment as possible. So I am a member of Berkeley Friends Meeting, Pacific Yearly Meeting, and we began in our Social and Environmental Action Committee, and our committee took it upon ourselves to try to decide and to make a recommendation about how we could best structure this process. And SEA made a recommendation to our Ministry and Care Committee that we thought the best way to go forward was to hear and begin our discernment within our meeting for business, which would be clerked by the clerk of our meeting. And we did that, as opposed to probably our normal process, which would have been set up a special threshing session because the timing. We literally have standard kind of events every first day afternoon after meeting for worship, and we thought it would take a while to get something else structured and scheduled. And we also wanted as many people as possible to be able to participate. And we didn't want just the same people who always come to kind of a social justice kind of threshing session to attend this one. So our meeting was on the first day of February. We made that recommendation immediately. Ministry and Care heard it that week, and our business meeting was the next first day, and we began our process then the first day of February. We started with with the queries. We emphasized that we wanted to encourage no judgments about anything anybody said. And the truth is, we didn't know where people were on this issue. Even though, being, the Berkeley meeting, people assume that we are, ultra progressive on everything. That's really not, an accurate assessment. We're not. And we know that. We had our first discernment session. And after that, a volunteer and our clerk wrote up a statement comprised of the FCNL statement, and then what our clerk discerned as being the sense of the meeting. And then this last weekend, this last first day, we took another look at that statement and gave final approval. And it might have already been submitted at this point, I don't know. So that was our process. It was, I think partially because we emphasized that everyone's input was appropriate and okay. We did not experience a lot of conflict at all, even though there was anxiety on the part of everyone going into that we were concerned that we would have that. So I'll finish there.
Yeah, thank you, Ginny. And Lauren, would you like to share what you've done so far?
Yes, thank you. And I will apologize to the members of Bethesda Friends meeting who are here, because I think they probably came looking for answers from this. And I am mostly reporting a lot of the questions that I have asked along the way, and became a panelist because I just kept saying, oh, Bethesda Friends meeting wants to know about this aspect of this. And Bethesda Friends meeting is curious about this as we were developing our process. So we are still mostly in that stage of having thought through what process we would like, and have only just started on it. So we also started with our Peace and Social Justice Committee, and brought the concern there to then make a plan for how we would address it in the meeting as a whole. And what we decided was that we would have a separate, not in our meeting for business, but have a separate called meeting to discuss this. That will be April 2nd for us. We are also starting to work on a statement that will be developed in our Peace and Social Justice Committee meeting this Sunday, actually. And so the idea is to take our Peace and Social Justice Committee meeting to hear from people. We've invited the whole meeting to join us for that, to start developing what we can potentially unite around, and then to bring that draft statement to the full meeting for further discernment. So a two-step process. In that way, it was certainly the possibility of having additional meetings if they are needed before the deadline. So that is the core of what we have talked about so far. We also had a small group from when it was first developed in our, or when it was first introduced in our Peace and Social Justice Committee meeting, who agreed to help to shape the plan moving forward. So it was both the Peace and Social Justice Committee as a whole that helped to hold it, but then also a smaller group who were committed to taking the action steps in between to make sure that there was a plan that we followed through on.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm hearing that both of your meetings are using the Peace and Social Justice Committee, and some meetings probably are thinking of doing this during business meeting, or even calling a separate special meeting for discernment. And I believe it will just depend on what suits the different meetings. Now, just as a follow-up question, did you find the queries that we shared with you and also the documents that we sent along, were those helpful during your discernment process? I know, Lauren, you haven't done that, but if you're considering, Jeannie, it sounds like you're done. Were those documents helpful to your meeting?
Yeah, absolutely they were, along with the other document on guidelines for discussions about abortion. Yeah, I think it was helpful for structuring the discussion and starting out the discussion. Once we got into the discussion, it was more free-flowing. And we didn't take it query by query. Our clerk read all the queries and then we started our discussion.
And I'll just add that our committee has been very grateful for these queries because it helps to give us a starting place. It's such a big topic. I think it could feel hard to know where to start, and that all of these materials give very clear guidance. So thank you for everyone who helped develop those.
Yeah, I was just looking in the in our notes for this meeting, and someone, excuse me, had asked a question about what kind of container had we prepared, for this discussion. And I think the queries actually served as that container. This is a topic that can be really overwhelming. And so I think the queries help to really break it down into manageable kind of pieces.
Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you, Lauren, for that. And another area, just to kind of change a little bit here. Again, this being a very sensitive topic and very emotional, you'll find that sometimes it's very difficult to get people to get started talking, and also just setting that tone can be also a challenge. So my next question to both of you, since there is a lot of an anxiety, surrounding, bringing this subject up to the meetings and fear, basically because of fear of conflict, how have you both created a plan, or how can you create that space to make people feel comfortable and willing to express their views and have this conversation without feeling very more anxious than they should? And Lauren, I don't know if you'd like to go first on this one.
Sure, thank you. I think one thing I would point to is the fact that I think most of our meetings are used to having challenging topics that we take up. And I think especially in these last few years, as more and more meetings have been actively thinking about their commitments to racial and social justice and really stretching themselves in those ways. And so my hope is that a lot of our meetings have good practice in this kind of brave space creation. I think the model that we used in this meeting is a good one, of sharing at the outset what the expectations are and the framing for how we're going to approach it as a community with care for each other. Part of the practice that my meeting in particular has is that over the summer last year, after the Dobbs decision and with the statement that FCNL put out about not having a position on this, we did create a minute around privacy based on the concerns that arose from the Dobbs decision. And so we had somewhat of a practice run with that, and so can lean into the fact that this is not totally new waters for us. But I think even for meetings that have not broached this specific topic before, that whatever issues we have been wrestling with, again, which most meetings that I know have had some that are really challenging for people and that people have different takes on, to remind ourselves of what our shared principles and values are, so that we are starting from that foundation.
And Jeannie, what was your approach on that?
So I think this is one reason that we thought it would be best to go with a discussion beginning at least with the meeting for business, and also why we wanted to start immediately. We explicitly wanted to give ourselves enough time in case we weren't able to decide and do enough discernment during our meeting for business, and might have to set up a threshing session. So we didn't want to feel rushed. And so that's why we began so early. But I think we wanted to use the meeting for business and the queries to focus our discussion, because it is a meeting for worship on the occasion for business. And we felt that there would be a more worshipful discernment kind of process going on there, that would be likely to happen. And it was something which friends are very used to doing, is to, as Lauren was saying, used to just talking about tough decisions. I mean, we only a couple of years ago finished renovating our building, and that was filled with tough decisions, which we made, in the meeting for business. And so, again, I like that language about a container, I mean, we tried to structure this so we had a container that everybody was used to, that could really deal with any conflict or tensions that might emerge from it. I think for us, that worked, along with, again, the emphasis on being non-judgmental about whatever anybody said.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, another question that I would like to pose to both of you has to do with the range of possibilities, because going into this conversation, you just don't know how or where your meeting is going to end up. So can you just talk a little bit about the range of possibilities that could come out of this discernment and the meetings? And while you're at it, how might friends find a way forward, even if they're having trouble coming to unity?
So should I start this time?
Yes.
Excuse me.
I don't know. Could you hear me? I think I was still muted. Okay,
No.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So the policy committee talked a lot about this when we were developing the queries. You know, our General Secretary, Bridget Moix, actually talked with us about big issues in the past that FCNL had to deal with, where they were able to come to unity because they saw the issue from another direction. And so that is something that our policy committee talked about, that and in fact, our meeting did. You know, our meeting and our discernment, we actually didn't talk about at all about abortion and whether or not abortion was moral or not. Nobody really talked about that. Friends just focused immediately on the healthcare of the issue, involved in the issue, and how a woman had a right to make a choice about her own healthcare. And so, you know, that's one way to see the issue. Other ways, I talked to Amelia right before this about some of the other ways. You know, you can focus on it as a healthcare issue. You can focus on it as a privacy issue, maternal health issue, childcare issue. So there are a wide variety of ways to look at the whole issue. If your meeting might be having problems coming to some sense of unity on an issue that's defined as abortion, you know, for or against abortion. And I'll stop so Lauren can.
Okay, Lauren, please.
I think Jeannie's answer was very good. What I would add is in part that what I've heard from the policy committee, again, as someone who's just been interested in this and asking questions, is that whatever we end up being able to come to is appropriate. So there's not a sense that we need to have come to clear unity on one specific idea, that what we can share with the policy committee is we had a really hard time with this question because people feel these different ways. That the sense of the group in a Quaker meeting is not necessarily that we all agree with something, that it can be nuanced, and that the policy committee is embracing that nuance and will use all of that nuance in their discernment moving forward. And so it's, to my understanding, there's a degree to which the invitation is come as you are, do as much work as you can by May 1st. We're not expecting that every community is going to be able to come to clear decisions by May 1st. And we are interested in hearing whatever you do get to, whatever people can agree to, including that they are not in agreement about something. So that feels important. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, that my meeting had already crafted a minute connected to this, and that those kinds of materials are also welcome as part of the response, that it doesn't have to only be new reflections or answers to these queries, but if we have existing documents, if we have existing minutes, that those are welcome too as part of this discernment. And so I think that there's not one size that fits all to this has been really important for me to hold on to as I accompany my meeting through this process.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that too, because as the policy committee, we don't know what we are going to get and receive from friends, and we really look forward to discerning your discernment. So it's very important to us that you share And you take the time, and we are really very appreciative that there are a lot of people on this call this evening listening to us, and just realize that we are anticipating and looking forward to receiving your discernments come May 1st. Now, just moving on to the next question here for you, Ginny and Lauren, before we change over to some of the questions that I see posted in the chat, is what is one thing, if there is one thing out there you learned from your meetings, that while you are organizing your discernments, that you think will be of help or will help other friends as they try to organize and plan for their own discernment. So is there anything, one thing? If you have two things, that's fine too, but if there is just one specific thing you'd like to share this evening with the other meetings, that may be helpful. So please go ahead and share that with us. Go ahead, Jeannie. I see you still.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say until a couple hours ago, I would say look at the form that FCNL has available online, because our meeting wrote up this statement and it bore no resemblance to the queries. And so I went back to them and said, oh, you're going to have to restructure this some. But because I reported that to Amelia, they actually created a spot in the form and revised the online form so that meetings could actually submit just general kinds of comments. So I think, that's kind of been dealt with. I would think I would say from our meeting, we really didn't have a need to be so anxious about it. We had been through conflict and had gotten through it. And my personal belief about conflict is that if you commit to going through with a tough issue and discern on it and work through it, it makes your meeting stronger and it makes your group stronger. So, I was really proud of the way that we went through it and just handled it and had discernment, and then came forward and, had, it was a very clear sense of the unity of our meeting around, our conclusions, and did it in the context of Quaker process. And, that was very important also. So several things, not just one.
I think my answer would be similar to what my response to the last question was, that it has really helped our meeting to understand that we don't necessarily have to come to the point of a minute or come to everyone agreeing to something or go through, because as we all know, and we've seen a little bit in the chat tonight, Quaker process can take months and we don't have unlimited time to give this feedback. And I think there was a lot of anxiety in our meeting just about how are we going to get to where we need to be by this deadline. And I think having that breath that we were able to take, knowing that there doesn't have to be a final answer on this, that we are being asked to consider where we are right now and to share that has been helpful. I think the other thing that I've heard through the process in conversation with Alicia and Amelia and members of the policy committee is that we're not trying to speak for all Quakers, that we are not saying this is the Quaker position on reproductive healthcare. We are saying from the communities that FCNL is working with, this is what we have heard. And this is where we are in this moment. And I think that also makes the stakes feel lower and makes it so that people just, again, show up as they are, say, this is where we are right now, and trust that process to move forward. And we are, one of the questions that I saw in the chat as well, We are doing the best as FCNL to invite in as many voices as are possible. And again, are not saying that we are speaking for everyone or that this is the Quaker stance on this issue. And so I think all of that feels important as we are making our way forward.
Thank you so much, Jeannie and Lauren, for your for sharing what your meetings are doing or planning on doing in terms of discernment around this issue. So what I'm hearing is you could organize around, use your Peace and Social Concerns Committee to do that, call a special meeting, or it could be a meeting for business. And here we have examples of 2 meetings, one that has already concluded the process. And then we do have another meeting that is planning to start the process very soon. And they've set up some dates for doing that. And just a quick reminder to everyone, we have a deadline of May 1st, because after that, the policy committee is going to meet and discern what you will have shared with us. And the other thing I had is just we need to be open to what will end up evolving during the meetings as you meet. So as much as you don't know what is going to come up at your own meetings, as a policy committee, when we meet, we also don't know, because we'll be waiting to receive your discernments, then take it from there. Now in the remaining time, I would like to shift a little bit now and take a few questions from the audience. I see we have quite a few questions. So Alicia has been monitoring these questions. So Alicia, what are people asking? What are friends out there asking? What would they like more of? I saw some things scroll in terms of resources. We had already discussed the queries we provided. And also we provided some information in the link. And you should have also received another email from me with a follow-up of the electronic version of those documents as well. So Alicia, what seems to be coming up so that we can see if Lauren and Jeannie and myself can respond to that?
Yes, I've been trying to keep up with the questions on the links, and to reassure everyone, we will include those in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow. So you'll have them. They're all on the FCNL website, all the resources and information about submitting your responses. I think some of these questions we've been addressing as we've gone. I guess I want to ask a question that came in from several different people in advance, which was, you mentioned sort of people's anxiety about these conversations. And several people said, I went to my clerk or my Peace and Social Concerns Committee, and they said no. They said, we don't want to do this. And so if either of you have thoughts on that, or if a community really isn't ready to have that conversation, whether it would be worth someone submitting their response as an individual. If any of you have thoughts on that question.
Yeah, we strongly encourage, and we would like to hear from meetings as opposed to individuals. But if you have to respond, we will look at everything that comes our way. So if your meeting, people are not willing to participate, we respect your continued willingness to do that. And please go ahead and submit your I guess it won't be your individual discernment. Submit what you have, and we will eventually get to it. But we would like to hear from groups instead of individuals. So if you're one of those, please go ahead and submit what you would have submitted if you would have been part of a group. Jeannie, do you have anything else, or Lauren, to add? Go ahead, Lauren.
Just going to add 2 thoughts. One is, I wonder if the meeting isn't able to do it in an official capacity, if an individual might still offer to host a conversation about that and to invite other people into that. Might not work at every meeting, but I imagine there could be some meetings where it could. And then the others that I know with Baltimore yearly meeting that there is a coordinated conversation that is happening at the yearly meeting level on these topics. And so I wonder too about people being able to plug into if there is a yearly meeting conversation already happening, or if they have access to suggest a conversation at the yearly meeting level if there's not someone at their local meeting willing to host or facilitate clerk that kind of conversation.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Jeannie, you have anything else to add?
Just that I know leading up to this, someone from a meeting had reached out to Ebby and I and said their meeting was already going through a really tough time and they were trying to work through it. And so they were going to not participate. And we certainly understand that. But, I just, want to reiterate what Evie said, that, if individuals are interested in making their own comments, then, that would be welcome and we would look at that. So everyone's meeting has, is at a different stage, is at a different place.
Great.
Alicia?
Yeah. Next question. I think there are several questions that there was a question about defining reproductive health care and what we mean by that. And then there was, I'll group that with a question about, is it important to have a physician or a lawyer or someone who is knowledgeable about the topic at hand as part of the conversation? I think it's sort of how much factual information is important to bring into the conversation so that so that people are talking about the same things, I guess. And I will just add on the end of that question that several people also ask questions about, the people in my meeting are not the ones who are most affected by these issues, and wanting, I think as one person put it, how do we keep old white men from being the ones to set the policies around reproductive health issues? And so thinking about making sure that, your thoughts on how those perspectives are considered as your community is undergoing discernment. I know I threw a whole bunch of questions at you at once, but I think they're all related to facts somehow. So share what thoughts you have, please.
Okay. Jeannie or Lauren, any of you want to try that question first? Jeannie, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Jeannie, I can go ahead and just get us all started on that. First of all, just going back to defining reproductive health, and also, like Alicia mentioned, you just see how complicated now that is starting to get when some meetings are asking, should we have a lawyer? Should we have a medical doctor in there? And that is now where, should we even, someone may ask, should we even have a politician in there? So that is where things start kind of getting complicated. And for us as the policy committee, we are going to look at all that. So whatever approach you'd like to take as your meeting, we don't want to constrain you, because we are going to look at all that and then discern everything we get from the different meetings. And that probably, and then we will end up having a seasoning session during the summer. And at that point, probably we'll have additional information to share. But at this point, I would just recommend to discern as spirit-led in your meetings. And then when you share that, we'll try to discern that information with other information we receive from other friends and bring it back to you at a session like this. And hopefully it will start shedding some light for us. But at this point, you can see why, friends, we haven't been in unity on this issue, because some of the questions, even before the decision from the Supreme Court Justice came out, we had already started receiving emails from friends who are identifying as FUM, FGC, and non-affiliate, and all different. So we've been receiving different things. And at this point, if we get into defining all those things for you, other than looking at it from the context or the fact that reproductive health affects all of us in many different ways, and I would rather look at it from that perspective. And I don't know, Lauren and Jeannie, did my conversation trigger anything for you, or something you'd like to expand on or share?
I guess I would just also encourage people to look at the guide to dialogue about abortion that was shared in the materials, and that's in the links that keep being shared in the chat. And I think that can be a helpful tool too, again, when it starts to feel really overwhelming, to have those guidelines about what a structured conversation can feel like.
Yeah, what Abby and Lauren said.
Thank you. Alicia, anything else?
Yes, many other questions.
Yes.
I guess I know we're going to talk more specifically about details a little bit later, so I'll save those questions. But I guess a question about whether you have any expectation that Friends will be able to come to more unity than has been in the past on this issue.
Jeannie, Lauren?
Tried to go into this without an expectation about where we're going to end up. And I would say I would continue to think that. You know, I don't have any expectation about how we're going to end up.
And I guess I will share that I think we're going through a very thorough, thoughtful process to reach a sense of our community, of our FCNL community right now. And that whatever the outcome of that is, feels like the process of that is important, that to have a statement that is reflective of where we are right now feels like it'll be a step forward, whether or not that ends up being the same place we were before. The fact that we have ventured into the conversation, given people tools for the conversation, invited a range of viewpoints feels important. One of the other things that I've heard in talking to folks from the policy committee about this is that the same is true for many of the other topics that FCNL lobbies on, that people are not all speaking with one voice on what those are. And that part of what we do is we hear from a lot of people, and for all of the issues that we end up lobbying on, we get a sense of the group from that, and we trust our policy committee to do that work of getting the sense of the FCNL community and using that to guide what our policy work is. And so I think doing that with this issue in particular is going to be healthy, no matter what that discernment leads to.
If I could add something else, you know, one thing that came through in our meeting was the fact that many friends were uncomfortable that FCNL continued to have no position on this. And so I think just having the discussion is important. And, you know, it's time this discussion was had. And, you know, wherever we end up, it's important to discuss, you know, this issue.
Thank you so much, Jeannie, for that the last statement. Actually, I was thinking the same, that just having a conversation, getting started is very important, and seeing that friends are interested and showing a commitment. Coming this evening to join us is also very important to us. And as a policy committee, we may or will come up with a recommendation based on what we hear from you. So I don't even want to go in with anything in mind, because I'm really interested in hearing what friends are telling us. So we may decide to leave it as it is, or we may decide that we've had enough or not. I mean, discern that what you provided us leads us to a very specific statement, which we will still share with you during annual meeting. And that is where we are hoping we'll have a statement to share one way or another, depending on the discernment. But again, I think just having the conversation after so long is a good step forward for FCNL. Alicia?
All right. Yeah, get to a few more questions. And I would invite, I know that we're not going to be able to answer every question that people have in the time that we have. And so if Amelia or someone could share in the chat what people should do if they have additional questions or want need some follow-up after this conversation. But I've seen a couple people asking questions or making about, thinking maybe outside of just their own Quaker meeting and thinking about, should we, I saw Doreen said, should we convene discernment from friends from specific professions, or should we, gather people who have children, and thinking about different constituencies, I guess. And is that something that the policy committee would be open to hearing from? And how should people indicate that that was the group that they had put together?
Yeah, one thing that I would like just to point out and remind everyone, this has to do with the policy statement, and that is we use our Quaker process, and it's the general committee that discerned and helped come up revise the policy statement. So I would still want to see this as being handled with a Quaker process. And therefore, so when we say bring in other people, I'm not sure to what level or extent, but I think it's very, very important that we continue to really focus on our Quaker process of discerning issues when we've had something every time, like we discern the priorities, and in the past when we've discerned revisions to the policy statement, and this particular issue that we are discussing is arising from the policy statement. Jenny and Lauren, anything to add?
All right. Let's see. I think we've covered sort of what people might report as a result of their discernment, and the answer is we accept a wide range of where you are. Anything from our community has reached agreement on this statement to here's some notes of where we were and we don't agree, and a minute, or pretty much whatever your community is able to come to is something that the policy committee would like to see.
So Alicia,
yeah.
You have any other?
No, I think we can move on. We were gonna, I think we wanted to close with some details about the process. And I know several people have had questions and concerns about the May 1st date for receiving results.
Yeah. I guess I'll ask Lauren and Jeannie here. So what is the process, particularly probably Jeannie, because you're a member of the policy committee. So what's the process going forward? And what if a meeting thinks they cannot meet the deadline? What should they do? I already said that everything has to be in on May 1st. So what does that mean for some meetings that may not be able to meet that deadline? Is there any flexibility, or what's the thought there?
If a meeting or church believes that they would not be able to make the May 1st deadline, then you could email either policy committee at fcnl.org or Ebby as clerk, or my name and email is also in the letters that have gone out, and ask for like another 2 weeks. We can't go much beyond that because the policy committee is meeting in June in DC, and we need to have read everything and reviewed it by that time. And we will, at that meeting, a weekend-long meeting, we will be trying to organize and collate or you know, absorb what we've read in some meaningful fashion. Then we'll have another meeting in July, and then I'll let Ebby, you can fill in the rest of the process.
Yes, and we may have another meeting probably in September, but expect another call like this during the summer for us to share the preliminary discernment that we gathered, and then bring something up to the annual meeting, the general committee during annual meeting in November. That is our plan, and that is the timeline for this process. Now,
Amelia had also put in the chat that there will be a listening session in August for members of the general committee.
Yes.
That will be presenting material to them.
Yes, and that is why the deadline, May 1st, is very important to us, like Jeannie said, so we have time to discern and process the information that we'll receive from friends. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for coming this evening and being here with us, spending an hour with us. Hopefully this session was helpful. If you still have any additional questions, feel free to email me or Jeannie, or just send an email to the FCNL email link. I think they put something in the chat. With that, Claire, you were still with us. Could you please wrap up for us this evening?
Yes, thank you. Before we conclude our event for this evening, I want to share a few things with you all. For a refresher on what Policy Committee is seeking in this discernment process, please visit this webpage that I'm about to post into the chat. This will give you more information on how to submit the results of your discernment, as well as practical guides for your community in this conversation. I'm also including the email address for Policy Committee. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you all so much for joining this event. Thank you to the panelists, Jeannie and Lauren, and thank you to Ebby for moderating this discussion. Have a great night, everyone. We hope to see you soon.